Hey guys, welcome back to Sad Dad. My name's Dave Abkary and I am a comedian out of Fresno, California, and this is a podcast where I sit down with my fellow funny friends, my fellow comedians, and we talk about dads. Hi, how are ya? How's your week been? Man, normally I try to should give you guys a shot in the arm of some positivity when I do these intros, I try to focus on the good. Nobody wants to just tune into a podcast and be all fucking bummed out about shit. But it has been kind of a rough week for me. It's just all these weird, big things, I don't know, this whole coronavirus thing is it's weird to see the effect that it's taking on. I mean, it's affecting a lot of things, but when you're trying to get people out to shows and gather in large groups to watch people perform, and the government's like, hey, avoid large crowds. It's like, oh wow, I really picked the wrong business to be in right now during a fucking pandemic. Oh no. It's wild. I was doing the storytelling show. I was telling you guys about it on Sunday, and literally nobody I've never run a show that nobody's shown up for. The headliner and I just ended up getting drunk together. It was so sad. That was wild. I've never felt I was talking about this somebody recently, but about that show. But I've never felt I've bombed a bunch as a comedian, but I've never felt like I've bombed as a promoter before, and that's exactly that's exactly how I felt. I woke up the next morning, I was all bummed out. That was the first thing I thought about. I was like, oh, I really fucked up, man. I really and I don't know how much of that was to blame on stuff happening in the world at large, or whether it was just I didn't promote it hard enough or whatever, but it just felt like I had a lot of steam. There was a lot of people really excited about it, a lot of people messaging me how stoked they are for it, and then to have nobody show up, I was like, this is wild. So anyway, that was a fucking bummer. And then Abby was on here. Abby was on here a couple weeks ago. She was talking about that Peach Blossom thing. It's where the kids learn a poem and then they perform it at the college here in Fresno, and it's a big event. It's been going on for forever, decades and decades, and they actually canceled that. Abby was pretty bummed about that. She's been working real hard on her poem and her performance for that, and it's just a weird time. I was setting up the comedy show on Monday night. I was setting up the room. I was moving the chairs and setting up the stage and putting up the lights. And I just remember thinking I bet this is a little bit how the musicians felt on the Titanic, where you have this huge existential crisis. I really related to those guys in that moment, because I think a lot of times we think of it as a selfless act. Those guys, play that little string quartet. If you've ever seen the movie, the Titanic movie, those guys just playing their instruments as the ship is sinking. And I think for a long time I thought they were trying to comfort people, and maybe they were, just a calming noise and sound and presence in the middle of complete chaos. But I think going through this, I think if they just didn't know what else to do, what is your skill set in the moment of a crisis as a performer? It's I perform, and that's kind of how I feel as a comedian. I don't know what to do. I don't know what else to do. I have nothing else I can do except tell jokes as the world burns down around me. It's here's a dating's weird, huh? Civilization is just crumbling around me. I don't know. It's just a weird time. It's a weird time to be it's a weird time to be a kid. It is wild. It is absolutely fascinating time right now to see and experience. And so anyway, wow, that was a fucking bummer. Sorry. Here we are. We're doing it. This is a podcast about dads. Thanks for tuning into my dad podcast. I got a great guest for you guys today. We do not talk all doom and gloom at all. It's a fantastic episode. this guy, Andrew Pupa, very, very funny comedian, up out of Los Angeles, originally from Boston. We talk a lot about that. He's also like an ultra marathon runner, which I think is absolutely fascinating too. I mean, the guy runs 100-mile races, 100 miles. That is insane. And he's so funny, so nice. And we really get into stuff here. I mean, he had a complicated upbringing. I mean, he's the youngest of 4 kids, and his parents. We'll get into all of that. I don't want to spoil anything for you guys, but it's a fantastic episode. I think you guys are going to really like this. So, without further ado, here we go, guys. Andrew Pupa. And did really well, and the booker is like, yeah, you're available to like come back and do this, and I was like, yeah, I guess, I don't know, I don't really have a huge desire to like drive all the way down here for your bringer shows, but
for sure,
I don't know, okay, and then a friend of mine that works there messaged me, and she was like, hey, did you know you're booked on a show tonight? Are you going to be here? I was like, I'm at my house.
Yeah.
They had spelled my name wrong. And then they never emailed me or anything. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, I guess I'm done with Flappers.
Yeah, no, there was they used to have the Flappers out in, God damn it was forever away. But it was like in the Inland Empire.
Uh-huh.
And it got shut down now. But I had gotten booked there somehow.
Yeah.
And I did the mic back. J-Light used to actually run the mic.
Oh, wow.
And so it was that far back. And they booked me on some shit. I showed up once and they canceled the show.
Ugh.
Another time they booked me and didn't tell me. And they sent me an email like an hour before the show. Are you going to be here?
Yeah.
And I was like, what show? Like, what do you... I was like, and then they like sent me the flyer, and it was not my picture. It just was comedian Andrew Pupa, and I was like,
hilarious.
I was like, if you want people to show up to your shows, you should probably tell them they're booked.
Yeah.
And they were like, you need to check our website to see if your bookings are up. And I was like, how?
What?
I was like, that's not how things work.
Right. I'm not supposed to be checking. That's weird.
Yeah, they're a weird bunch there.
Do you have a towel?
I do. Yes. If you go into my bathroom, because I am actually recording, but if you go into my bathroom, there's a set of 3 cabinets in the very top cabinet. I got a towel in there. Yeah.
Got it.
I'm gonna scoot this a little closer to you. Did you
Yeah.
Oh yeah, go for it.
I didn't know if I should touch anything. Yeah, I was gonna bring it closer to me because I was like, I can't.
Easy right
but
in,
I
buddy.
hate. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
No, you're fine.
I know like from my podcast, like know the proximity, but I was like, all right. I don't know if I touch this. Like, you have a much better setup. Like when I touch this with mine, because I don't have the bass, you can hear like when it's like clamped on, and it's like bring, and it ruins like for like 10 seconds.
These are the. I think everybody has these like $12 Amazon.
Yeah. But you took off the bottom bass and planted it in there, and it changes the whole.
Part of it was like this is beveled.
Yeah.
And it like they would just slip off all the time.
Yeah.
And so then it literally like this entire setup was born from me being annoyed
by this slipping
off, and then it became
Solid.
like I'll pull those clamps off and I'll shove it into a piece of wood, and then the piece of wood was kind of shitty, and then I'm like, and it was literally all from
a whole thing,
a whole.
And now it's
thing.
this like post-apocalyptic like Christmas tree holder.
Yeah,
that is
actually that's the base for an outdoor umbrella.
Oh, I wasn't far off.
You weren't far off. You're.
I know. Hey, I do know some random equipment.
My dad put it together for me. He's like, I can paint that for you. I was like, no, I like it. Like,
that's awesome.
Yeah, this weird rusted. Like,
that looks great.
No, that's cool. Yeah. Speaking of shitty bringer shows, did you ever do the spotlight shows?
No, I have not done so. I try to stay away. Like if it looks like a bringer show, I try to stay away from it just because like I don't want to deal with that. And like bookers are fucking crazy. Like we both know. Like even as two people, like I used to run a show, you run a show now. Like there's like a whole gamut of shit you had to go through all the time.
Yeah.
But like those shows, like I think I did. That guy used to do a show in Long Beach too, at this place called like something Pete's, Cuban Pete's or something. And I went to go do the show, and he said I was booked. Whatever. I showed up. It's at this place where they're charging like $20 for people to get in.
Jeez.
And it's like 5 comics, and it's this whole fucking weird system.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I'm good, man. He said, you don't want to go up? And I was like, this is fucking weird. I don't know what
Yeah.
your deal is. I have no idea what's going on. And that same person now runs like a lot of those Spotlight Sundays and all of that shit. And so I haven't done it. Have you?
I did it once. Yeah. I had a friend of mine was hosting it.
Yeah.
And she was like, hey, I'm doing this. I'm hosting this weird show and I don't feel great about it.
Yeah.
Like, will you come down and like do it too? And I was like, does a guy need a tape or anything? She's like, no.
Yeah. She's like, how much more can I say no?
Yeah, right. I was like, all right. Like, and so, I mean, a lot of it is just part of the adventure. Like, I mean,
Yeah,
one
for
thing,
sure.
It'd be
Like,
one thing if I lived in LA,
Dude.
but just having this weird.
Like similar, but not like as far as bringer go, but like not knowing what you're getting into. Have you ever done Justin Fox's room in Hemet?
No.
Okay, well, Justin Fox is an LPG, like literally a little person, and he's fucking great, but he's kind of a zany character, like anybody, you know. And he used to be in the OC scene, and then he moved out to Hemet. And so he hit me up and was like, "Hey man, would you like to do my show?" Blah blah. And I was like, "Yeah, sure." I get down there, and it's like a dive bar, like this little tiny dive bar, and we've all done dive bar shows,
Right.
but it's like a 3-hour drive for this. So I walk in, and there's like 4 people, and I'm like, okay, let's get a drink. This is what this is going to be.
Comedy,
like, I'm like, yeah, thank you, comedy. And then, actually, it's attached to what used to be like a roller rink, I guess, in the back that is now made into an arena.
Yeah.
And so right before showtime, like 100 people show up and just fill this whole back area that I didn't even know existed.
I do remember
Derbies.
you telling me. Yeah,
it's called
I do remember you
Derbies.
telling me about this.
And like, he opened the doors and it was like getting into Narnia. I was like, what the fuck just happened? I was like, this shouldn't be here. Why is this here?
Well, yeah, you know, it's. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt you
you're
there.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, what's funny too is like being from Fresno, like halfway between LA and San Francisco. There's the shitty LA shows, but there's also the shitty San Francisco shows.
Oh yeah.
And there's
shitty shows everywhere.
there's one that reached out to me recently, I remember messaging because I'm in like this cool kids, like I somehow got into this like cool kids Facebook group.
That's
with,
cool.
like all the San Francisco kids, and they all make fun of this one room that just asked me, like just booked me. And I remember messaging a few of my friends in that group. I'm like, hey, would you think I'm really uncool if I did this show?
Yeah.
Like, because I really don't need to do this show.
Yeah.
But if it's gonna damage my reputation by doing
Like
this
coming up
shitty-
to San Fran, like if I do the show, my blacklisted from all of your shows.
Right.
Yeah.
And they were like, nah, we just shit on that show. It sucks. But like, you just do whatever you want to do. And like, they're actually really cool about it. They're like, yeah, do that show, and then here's a list of a bunch of other bookers to hit up while you're up here.
Oh, that's
do
awesome.
Their show. And they run.
That's
cool
great,
shows.
man.
I'm like, all right, that's cool. But yeah,
I've only done the San Fran run one time, and everybody up there was fucking cool.
Yeah.
Like nobody was weird. Everybody was just like cool as fuck the whole time.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I can fuck with San Francisco. Like I can come up here whenever.
yeah. There's a lot of funny people. The problem with a lot of those comics is they don't have cars.
Yeah.
So it's hard for them to do the road. You know, they're just
for
like
sure.
stuck in the SF ecosystem for forever. You know.
Yeah, I've lived in cities and I've never understood that, like not having a car. Like I still have that compulsion to like wanna, like if I want to get the fuck out, like I need an outlet.
Yeah.
And they're just like, just walk and take the subway.
Yeah, just take the bus, take the subway,
And I'm like, what if you want to go further? And they're just like, oh, I figured it out.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I could not. That part of it where I'm like, if I want to go to San Diego today,
Right.
I want to go to San Diego today.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want like if I get booked on something, I don't want to like. One time my car broke down and I was on one of Matt Cole's shows in Orange County, and it was like in Placentia.
Yeah.
And actually, my car didn't break down. My girlfriend was using my car because hers was in the shop. And I was like, fuck, I'm booked on a show tonight. Like, I don't have a car. I'm not working today, but I need to get there.
Yeah.
And I need to get there on time. Like, I hate being late. It's you saw, I showed up 2 hours
Yeah,
early
you were
yesterday because
aware.
I'm
Like,
a
I was
psycho.
still in the middle of setting up. Yeah.
And so I took 3 buses and an Uber to get to the show. And he's like, hey, man, you could have just not, like, you could have just told me. And I was like, yeah, I don't do that. It's it's like that weird thing about like calling into work. Where you're like, I have paid time off, but I won't call into work because that's not what men do.
Yeah,
like my
right,
brain
right.
just like has this thing where I can't get over that. Like even though I'm very much entitled to doing that, I just don't, and I can't, and I freak the fuck out.
Dude, I did that club, that Placentia show, the clubhouse show. I did that with Matt last month. I don't know if I told you this story yesterday or not, but the funniest fucking thing, it was like that night. Wasn't like the turnout was a little lighter than it normally is, and it was like a tighter crowd than normal. And I mean, the comics did okay. Myself, I probably had the weakest set of the night, and it was And it was like, okay. Like, I mean, I've bombed my dick off. Like, I know what that feels like.
But it wasn't that.
It wasn't that.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm nobody like really murdered. And there were really good comics on that show. The Tom Goss was on that show. John Wynn was on that show. Like, it was like a solid
show.
The crowd just wasn't like giving it up real easy. And I think it was like the first like not great show they had in a little while, like ever maybe. And I was hanging out with Matt Cole, and the owner just tears into Matt over it, like gives him a hard time. And meanwhile, Matt, at the beginning of the show, he's been working on this new bit about shitting himself.
Okay,
and, it's a funny bit.
Yeah,
but he's still working it out. And this says, and then you're up there talking about shitting yourself. I'm trying to sell tacos.
That is golden. That's so fucking funny because it's such a ridiculous thought. Like I can totally imagine like that happening, and I know the type of guy who yelled at him. Like I've seen that guy there. I know, like I couldn't imagine like Matt's face just be like.
Well, it was funny too because like I was glad I was there for Matt because Matt kind of was like bewildered by it, and it never. I've been in that position before where I've had like a GM or an owner like pissed at me about a show and how things went.
Sure. Yeah,
I've been there, so I like really empathize with him. But then Matt told me that part of it, and I was like, Matt, that is hilarious. Like I'm like
That's
doubled
great.
over crying laughing after he tells me that, and I think it was good for him because he got to see the ridiculousness of it too. And I'm like, Matt, next one's gonna be fine. We had one bad show in 6 years.
And
like you're fine.
That's the insanity of like a person who like owns the place.
Yeah.
Because I had that where I was doing a show at a brewery, and the first like 4 weeks that we were there, like it was like packed out, like crazy.
Yeah.
We had one bad week, and the guy was like, "We got to do something about this," and I was like,
"One?
What?"
Yeah, it's just
I was
one
like,
bad week.
I was like, last week the bartenders told me they've never made more in tips ever on a Thursday.
Right.
And you didn't have anything going on these days before, but now you need to triple your profits. I was like, you're fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And like a month later it was over because he's like, well, if we have down weeks like that, I just can't do that.
Oh, Jesus.
And I was like all right.
That's the if anybody ever asks me for advice on running shows, that's the thing I always tell them is like, if the owner of the venue doesn't see their relationship with you as a partnership, it's not going to work. Because the second you have a rough night, they're going to throw you under the bus. And I've been there. Like, that sucks, you know?
Yeah. Well, and it's their place. Like, in the end, like, you can't be like, well, fuck you. It's like, cool, you're done. Like, you're done. Like, there's no more show. Well, and like, you gotta like grovel at their feet, and it's like, fuck that. Like,
and that's where like I've gotten to the point, like, if a venue is approaching me, because at this point, it helps having like a couple of like successful shows under your belt.
Yeah.
But like, it's happened on several occasions where like we'll go. The owner wants to meet with us. They want to talk about it, and I will lay it out. Like, I'll be this is this and this.
Yeah.
And if the answer is no to any of that, then
we won't go forward.
Yeah. And they'll try to call me on my bluff, and I just have gotten up and walked away.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
They're like, well, where are you going? I'm like, this isn't gonna work. Like, I'm telling you right now, I've done this enough times. This is not gonna work.
Yeah.
And it's funny how quick people fucking change their tunes, dude. So yeah, I mean,
it's just the way of it. Like when you're trying to put on shows, like you're just gonna have to deal with people like that.
Yeah,
you know,
100%.
like, and I mean, I did a show down in South County, Orange County, where it was at this gay bar, and it was like this basement of this gay bar.
Yeah.
And they asked me to do the show, and I was like, fucking, I'll do a show anywhere. Like, this is gonna be great. And it was actually perfect for comedy. And it was packed out. Like, comics showed up every single night. People bought drinks. It was always packed out. It's a show and then a mic, kind of like, you know, what we were doing last night. And it's packed all the time. And they had been hurting for money. They were like almost going to shut down at one point, and this helped them get like up and running. And it made them enough money till like a year later. He's like, I think we're maybe going to like do a variety show, and maybe a few of your comics can be on. And I was like, no.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, you could host it, so you could still like do time. And I was like, no.
Yeah.
I was like, that's not what this was supposed to be. And he was like, are you serious? And I was like, yeah, man, I have no want to do a song and dance variety show. Like, that's not what I want to like spend my Thursday nights doing for the next foreseeable future.
Yeah.
And the guy was like, I just don't understand why you're not just happy to be doing something. And I was like, because this is what we said. Like when we had the conversation about starting a show there, he was pumped and all over it. And then once they made their money, it's just like they have complete control over everything. And so I was just like, all right, I'm out, and I just bowed out. And then like 2 years later, he hit me up again and was like, hey, can we start doing that again? And I was like, this is not going to end well.
You grew up in Boston?
Yeah.
What's that like?
It was good, man. I mean, it's funny. I grew up like 30 miles north of Boston. It's so a lot of people know the easiest way to tell anybody about it is that I grew up in the city or the city next to where Mickey Ward came from, like in The Fighter. Like Lowell. Lowell is like a big thing. Lowell's a mill city, and it's like a small city, but it's famously was called like the town and the city by Kerouac or whatever. And it's kind of a like blue collar type area. And the town I was from was super fucking like, one side was super rich, like literally it's called North Tewksbury, and then there was South Tewksbury. And if you were from South Tewksbury and you like had money, you had to like prove that like you weren't one of those South Tewksbury kids. Oh wow! And I was very much one of those South Tewksbury kids.
What are you doing here, Southie?
Yeah, like wrong side of the tracks type deal. So it was good growing up, but it definitely like looking at what people complain about, like growing up out here, I'm like, oh, you fucking what? Like are you kidding me? Like the shit that like we had to put up with on the East Coast, and like just the way you're indoctrinated with everything, like the way that you're supposed to act, the way that you're supposed to like not show emotions and all that shit. That like, it's funny. That's always the joke everybody has is like, I grew up in the East Coast, and that means like I had to be barefoot in the snow and fucking didn't give a shit if my arm was cut off, and I had to like talk, like my dad's never seen me cry. Like all this shit is like kind of true. Like it kind of still exists to this day, where I don't know if it's just because it's cold and it just makes people like worn out and like just hardened dealing with that. But for sure, like growing up there, I wouldn't change it for anything, but it is not for everyone. Like growing up out there, like I feel like I could drop half of my California friends. Like if I always said, people are like, oh, what was it like growing up? And I was like, I thought it was normal for a long time. But if I dropped you into my family, you would freak the fuck out. Like, you would have no idea, like pretty rough upbringing, but like it really helped formulate who I am. So I'm not upset about any of it. But growing up in Boston was definitely a different experience.
Did you have a big family? Or
Yeah. So, I mean, Irish and Italian family. My mom's actually from out here. Funny enough, she was on the U.S. Olympic gymnastics team.
Oh no shit!
She was like did that her entire childhood up until high school and everything. She got on the U.S. team, but met my dad that summer and just fucking ran away with. She basically achieved what she wanted to achieve. And before she could go to the Olympics, she left town, skipped town with my dad, and moved to Massachusetts. Which I'm like, how the fucking what? And so she moved out there, and he's from like a big Italian family, and I was like, okay, and so my dad's family's pretty big. My mom's family is out here, so I'm just meeting a lot of them like since I moved out here like 7 years ago. And but my dad's family's huge. Like I mean, like the stereotypical Italian, like just. When we had Christmas, we'd have like 9 families. I'm like, I don't even know who they are. Like, who are these people? And they're like, that's your uncle's sister's cousin's friend. And I'm like, that's not a relative. Why are they here? But you're just like,
I don't have to like this person.
To this day, I have an Uncle Bumpsy, and I don't even remember who he was. Like, I knew that I went to his house like for like horseshoes and shit, like once a summer for like 3 summers in a row. I don't know who that guy was. I have no idea what relation he was. It was just one of those things where like, your family's so big and there's so many people around that you have those people you call like your uncle, who are your dad's friend, like that type of thing. Where it's just like, cool, you can just jump on this family train and they're in. So
that's funny.
Yeah, it was pretty huge. I mean, and I'm one of 4, and like my immediate family, I have 2 older sisters and an older brother, so I'm the youngest of 4.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild. Well, and we'll get to the baby in the family.
Yeah.
What kind of kid were you? Like, were you?
Oh man. You know what? Like, again, I grew up in like a, I won't say we weren't like dirt poor, but like, like we weren't far from it. My dad was working class. He did like carpet installation and floor installation, stuff like that, but wasn't great with his money. Like taxes aren't a thing, like taxes don't exist. Like people just don't pay taxes, which is a problem for your children later on. Spoiler alert for people out there, don't pay your taxes. Your kids will not be able to get any kind of tuition reimbursement at school.
Oh, no.
Yeah, exactly. But, like growing up, I grew up like that. So it was a working class family, and it was fine. Except the funny part was like my brothers and sisters kind of did what most like siblings do, like where they're testing the waters and everything. So my sisters and them were partiers. Like my sisters were crazy. Like they ended up partying in Lowell, which is the next town over, because there's like rough and tough, like cool dudes with like face tattoos in Lowell, and like they're like little white chicks, and they're like, ooh, what's this like? This is spicy. This is a change, you know? And so they kind of like figured out that shit, and they did a bunch of bad shit, and my sisters now like have figured it out. My sister Sarah is phenomenal. She had a kid at 19 and like spun out for a minute, and now she's like legit. She has a great job. She, you know, has a house. She's doing great.
Yeah, good for her.
But like they did all the worst shit, and then my brother went completely off the rails and like, fuck everybody, I'll do whatever I want. And just kind of took over the household and was like, I'm partying with my friends, we're gonna drink every weekend, and we're just gonna take over. And so for me, like everybody was fucking up all over the place, so I was like, if I just stay quiet enough and I do nothing, I am the savior. You know what I mean? Like put it this way,
which is almost the opposite of what you normally. It's the younger sibling that runs off the rails.
And it was just like it was an abusive household, you know, like growing up and watching that as a kid. And so like all of that's going on, and I was just like, man, I just need to be okay. And so like I started joining like punk bands and stuff like that. And I was in like a pop punk band for like 2 years. And then I was in like a
what did you play?
Vocals.
Oh,
nice.
Nice.
So I was in a pop punk band and did that. And then I was in like a screamo like band for a little while and doing that and all that. But during all that, like I went to Thailand for a school trip and got a tattoo while I was there. And I called my mom, and I was like, this is the kind of like how you can't fail when you're the kid who doesn't fuck up enough.
Right.
And so I literally called my mom at 16 and was like, hey, I'm about to get a tattoo in Thailand. And she's like, if that's the worst you do, like she doesn't give a fuck. Like she's like, as long as it's not on your face, and like, have you thought about it? Like, you know, she didn't give a shit.
Right.
She's just like, you've always made decent decisions, so like I'm sure you're not going to do something so dumb. And so that's kind of like the way it was. We just like with growing up in a family where like my dad was abusive to my mom and all of that, like you kind of raise yourself. And so we all did it differently. Like they all spun out and went crazy and found like weird friends, and I had like a few close friends. And then honestly, my music friends like probably saved me. Like from being that crazy like fourth kid who was like, you know what you guys are doing? Like you guys are, you know, drinking and smoking. I'm gonna shoot up heroin. Like that stopped me because it gave me that outlet to be like, okay, this is my group. Like I didn't feel comfortable at home, so like finding a home like with all these friends just like changed the game. I don't know. Without that outlet, it's got a lot like comedy now. Like if I didn't have that outlet, I don't know where I'd be at the time, because growing up like that was not the best. You know, like it's one of those things where I try to do a bit about this, but it's just too real sometimes, about the fact that like I realized recently I was good friends with a cop. And I was like, oh, I know Officer Westaway. He's the shit. He's the best. He's a good dude. Like, he's my buddy. And I was like, oh, no, that's the guy who used to report to your house when, like, people called the cops.
Oh, no.
Like, he wasn't your friend. He was just around all the
Just
time
doing
because
his job.
there was domestic abuse happening. He's not your friend. He's doing his job. But, like, as a kid, I didn't realize that. I was just like, oh, Officer Westaway, like, whenever I see him around town, he, like, fist bumps me and stuff. And I'm like, it's because...
He fist bumps you, and then he turns to his partner and he's like, that poor fucking kid.
He's like, he is fucked. This kid, he's like, we're going to be locking that kid up in a fucking couple of years. Like, he seems sweet now, but he's fucked for life.
Hilarious.
You know, so...
Do you feel like, I mean, I don't know, I felt like this because my older brothers had some problems, or I should say my brothers, my older brother and my younger brother. But do you feel like you were under a lot of pressure to be normal? You know what I mean? Like
I do. Yeah. I mean,
like maybe a self-imposed pressure. That was a lot of what I dealt with. Was like oh, I saw the stress that my siblings were causing, and I didn't want to be another source of that.
Yeah, for sure. Like even when like famously like within my family is that they used to always say when I was younger, like, oh, it like never bothered you when like dad and mom were fighting. Like that never bothered you. And I was like, it did. I just pretended to be asleep. Because like I didn't want to create more of an issue. So I'd literally lay there on the couch or on a bed or whatever and just pretend to sleep through these horrific fights that are happening. And they're like, I can't believe that didn't bother you. I was like, oh, it bothered me. I just like you guys were running around screaming, yelling, doing all this crazy shit. And I'm like, none of this is going to help.
Yeah.
So I think it probably helped me process things as a kid, but I definitely did that. Like I grew up, I joined scouts, like Boy Scouts and stuff. And I was doing that because I thought I needed to. And I did like this high adventure crew where I like how I first got into the mountains and stuff was that. Yeah, and so I was doing all this crazy stuff that like looks good on paper, but part of me, like I really enjoyed it. Like, don't get me wrong, like that was fun stuff for me and I made friends that way. But none of it felt comfortable. A lot of it felt fabricated. Like I'm putting up a facade of like this good kid when really if I could just do whatever I wanted, I would stop doing all of this right now.
Yeah.
You know, like giving up every weekend.
But it's almost like you had this like weird unconscious wherewithal that like you knew you needed structure and you weren't getting it from where you were supposed to be getting it.
For sure.
And I think that's good.
Yeah. And like in a weird warped sense, like it gave my mom pride. Like to be proud of one of her kids. Like not that I don't think she loves her kids, but it was someone to actually like brag about. Right. Like parents love that shit. Like you were talking about your daughter playing sports and everything. And she's super into, like softball and all that or baseball, whatever. Yeah. Like you tell people about that. Yeah, and my mom couldn't. Like you know what I mean? She could like say like, wow, like Tony's doing this, Sarah's doing like But with me, she was like, oh yeah, he's flying to New Mexico and he's gonna be climbing mountains for like 10 days. Like stuff that sounds impressive. In doing all of that, I think that kind of instilled in me, like people ask like why I set so many goals. And I'm like, oh, I just like that feeling. I think now that's my high that I'm always chasing is like, I don't need someone to be proud of me, but I've built in the system now where I have to feel good about me. So in the end, I think it was good. Getting there, probably fucking should see some therapists and shit. But I work past that.
I mean, it is a kind of a rough way to learn and to understand the importance of like you're validating yourself, looking for that validation within yourself, knowing you're probably not going to get it from your folks. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of people that probably wish they had that, but I don't think they really want to take the same journey that you had to take to get it,
Yeah, and I mean, I had as much like as little structure as I had growing up. There were certain people in my life at certain times that set that example that I didn't see at home. Sure. You know what I mean? Like my stepdad, like now, there's stuff that I would love for him to fix about himself. But at the time, when my mom and dad were just all over the place, just figuring out their shit. My dad like spun out and then got remarried. My mom was an alcoholic for a while, or you know how she is an alcoholic, but she's recovered. Right. But like hardcore, like problematic, like fully functioning to the point where I didn't know she even drank for a really long time. That kind of level of stuff, and so. Like, that was all going on, and I was like, oh, okay, like, keep it together. But then my stepdad came through and was like, hey, join Scouts, do this stuff, like, this could be structured. And I'm like, okay. And then I dated a girl in high school, and her parents, they weren't, like, well off, but they were better with money. Yeah. And so, like, I never understood, like, saving money or doing anything. It was just, like, paycheck to paycheck, and just fucking figure it out, and, like, who cares shit? Like, as long as you're working, you're good. And they were like, no, don't do that. You're going to like spin out. You're going to freak the fuck out. Yeah. And you're going to not have enough money. You're like, it's irresponsible. And they kind of set that example. And I was like, I'll be forever grateful for those type of people that I've met along the way. I feel like when you don't have a good nuclear family, you like, I don't know if you seek out people, but every job I've ever had, there's always like a mentor, somebody setting the example. And I think I gravitate towards those people. Right. And like last night, I think we both kind of have that same feeling probably. Because now in comedy, I try to do the same thing. For those younger comics who are just looking. They're just like reaching out for anyone. Yeah. And I'm like, I've been that kid in so many situations. That like, I feel like I recognize that in people at my day job and with comedy, like who just need one person to be like, it's going to be fine. Yeah, absolutely, man. And and even if I, like one thing I try to get good at, I mean, I did it with that new guy last night, but I try to like, in my mind, try to pair that kid up with who I think would be a good like friend to that kid, like last night, that guy, I immediately introduced him to, Anthony Dugan, who's close to that kid's age. Anthony's been doing comedy for a year and a half, 2 years now, so Anthony can actually give the kid some meaningful advice. Definitely. Like, and sure as shit, they like hit it off and I'm like, good, because I don't think I have anything in common with this 21-year-old outside of like we both do comedy, for sure. So yeah, you're but you're right though. I mean, it's good that you
like sought those relationships out, and then and now you're again trying to pay it forward. So
I mean,
it's great now that we're old.
Yeah, exactly. When you're younger, like it's weird. Like there's shit that I didn't know was bad. Like not that I didn't know it was bad, I just didn't know it wasn't happening everywhere.
Right.
Like because my best friend down the road had a similar circumstance. It wasn't quite as like gnarly and fucked up as mine was, but he also had a dysfunctional family to the point where like when his parents would fight, he would come stay at my place, and like it was literally like a Bronx Tale style thing where you're just like fucking crawling in each other's windows, and you're just like, "You good, man? Yeah, I'm fine." And like didn't talk about the fact that we were like dying inside. It's just like I crawl in, I fall asleep. We don't even talk about it the next day. Let's play some fucking video games and get the fuck out and go skateboarding and act like nothing happened.
Sure.
But like now as an adult, I'm like, oh man, like I'm so grateful for those people.
Sure.
Like having like I'm best friends with that same guy now. Like I'm 32. We've been friends since we were 4.
Oh,
and so like I don't know any other person that I've even known for that period of time outside of like my family.
Sure.
And like so those type of people who are your staples.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean it's nice to be where I'm at now, but it was a long road. Like anybody who's just like, oh, I can't figure it out, dude. Like it'll click.
Yeah.
Hopefully it'll click one day.
Did you end up going to college back east?
Yeah. So I mean that's why I made that joke. Is so. I got into a college and I couldn't go because I couldn't get, so my parents, again, working class, under the table type people, never pay their taxes. Had never paid taxes ever.
What kind of business were they in?
My dad worked for like a floor and carpet installation person, but it was a lot of under the table shit, and he just didn't give a fuck and just never dealt with anything. And by the time I was going to college, he really had like, life had not been good to him. Like things like, had come back full circle kind of. And he hadn't paid taxes in forever. And so I went to apply for financial aid and they're like, hey, you're not 26 or 27 or whatever the rule is in Massachusetts. And they're like, you can't get this because your parents don't pay their taxes. And I was like, oh, but they're not part of me. Like I work like a 40-hour-a-week job. Can I do this? And I couldn't pay for school because I couldn't get a loan because I had used a credit card to like buy my parents things like that they were supposed to pay off later on, like appliances and shit, and they just never paid it. And like I didn't have any means to do so it fucked up my credit. So I literally had no means to continue. So I went to community college for a little while, and I did that, and I just couldn't afford to transfer into a big school. And I was like, oh, fuck, what the fuck am I going to do? And a buddy of mine had been an EMT. And he's like, hey, dude, you're like empathetic. You can do a lot of things. You're a pretty, bright guy. Why don't you try doing this?
Yeah.
And I was like, sure, whatever. And so like on a whim, I just paid for like an EMT class.
Right.
And I just crushed it. Like it made sense to me.
Yeah.
Like I always wanted, like probably because of like the way I grew up, I enjoy taking care of people.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I can help you. And you're like, I can just turn that on and off.
Right.
And so I took the class, crushed it, ended up working in just outside of Boston in like Arlington, Medford, Somerville area, working 911 and like transfer stuff for a while. And then I was like getting a little burnt out because I was working, like the way it works is a lot like a fire department. We were working like 24-hour shifts. So you work 24 hours on, 24 hours off, 24 hours on, and just like keep going. And you pick up shifts. So I'd pick up like a 16-hour shift on a weekend when I wasn't working. So I'd work like 24 on a Tuesday, 24 off, 24 on a Thursday, pick up an 8-hour on a Friday, then pick up another like 16 on a Sunday, and you're just killing yourself.
Right.
And so I did that for a while, and then we work with dialysis patients, and so I was like, oh, this is different, whatever. And a buddy of mine, their ambulance company had gone under, and so he became a dialysis tech. And I was like, oh, you can do that? Like, I thought you needed a lot more schooling or whatever. And he's like, nah, dude, you can just do this. And he's like, you're better than I am at what we did, so you could totally do this. And so I applied on a whim, thinking I wouldn't even get a call back. I got offered the job like 10 days later or something.
Nice.
And so I've been working in that industry since.
How cool.
Yeah, so it's not bad.
When did the comedy come in?
So I've always been the funny thing is like, even with all my family's like dysfunctions and everything, we would sit down to watch TV. We'd do that kind of stuff. And I used to watch MASH with my dad all the time.
Yeah.
And so that like zip zop zip between Pierce and Hawkeye, like going back and forth, like that was a huge fucking thing. Like that was like I watched that and I was like, oh, that's fucking awesome. Like I just recognized that like that. I loved how quick their brains worked.
Yeah.
And then with my mom, she watched like Mork and Mindy, and Robin Williams was so fucking zany and weird.
Right.
And so like watching those different characters, I was like, oh, I get this. And like Klinger, I was like, oh, that's crazy that he did that at that time. Like this is all so outside of the box, and I really enjoyed that. And I watched Golden Girls with my mom, and just like the jokes there, even like the dark humor in it. I was like, oh, I love all this stuff. And then what really probably got me was I used to watch Jim Carrey in Living Color, and I was like, I want to be that guy. Like he's so fucking funny. Like everybody thinks this guy's funny. I wasn't a huge SNL kid. I think because my dad wasn't into SNL, so I watched like Living Color and like Mad TV a little bit, but mostly Living Color was like the shit that was on, and then all the old shows. So it's funny because everybody like pines over those years of SNL, but I missed it during. I've gone back and watched them all. But because my dad wasn't into it, I didn't see it. It wasn't it wasn't a household thing.
A lot of those old ones don't age well. Like,
I'm sure.
I mean, nobody gets your fucking Jimmy Carter jokes, dude. Like,
for sure.
And so you kind of grow up. You got this like, it's a little bit of a passion, little tender spot for comedy in your heart. But when does the stand up kick in? Like, what's that moment like?
Yeah,
for you?
So towards the tail end of being there, like, I mean, when I was a kid, like that was also I was in the Boston area. Sandler had put out his mixtapes, and I was like, oh, you can do anything with comedy. You can do this shit. Like, so like that unlocked a lot for me, and I was always like, oh, I love writing. And so I went to school for creative writing and literature for a bit, and I was always writing all the time. And so I was like, oh, I can just turn this into writing bits instead of writing like stories. Like I wrote a short story about going to Thailand. I wrote like 100-page novella and like could have gotten it published. Like I got it like, proofread and all this stuff. And I was like, whatever. That's just for me, whatever. And I was just always like enjoying writing. And so then, I was at that job. And I was like, oh man, I need a fresh start. I need to get out of Boston. I'd get out of a really long relationship that we like thought things were going to go towards marriage and everything, and it did not. And you know how that is, like you start just going through the same cycles over and over again. You're doing the same shit constantly. Yeah. And I was like, I need to get out of town. And so I applied for a job out here. And again, like I just interviewed well on the phone, and they offered me the job. And I was like, hey, can I take 2 weeks to just like drive out here and just come out? And so I packed up all my shit, like gave my notice, transferred out with the company I was with, and came out here. And right after I got out here, I was like, oh, comedy's more of a thing out here. Like in Boston, I didn't really know the scene. I'd gone to a show, Lamont Price, who's a really funny comic in Boston. I'd seen like a couple of his shows. I'd seen some shows, but it wasn't like in me that like that was attainable. Like it seemed like something that other people did. Right. Like I was like, oh man, I would love to write this shit, but like, oh, I don't know, like that. And it was weird because I was on stage doing like music for a while, and I was singing, like I was the front man of a band. And so like you would think that you're just like, oh, that makes sense. But it didn't for a while because it just didn't seem like something that I could do. And funny enough, I actually went to the Irvine Improv when I first moved out here. And I went to go see a show, and it was, I'll remember the lineup. So there was a local guy who I'm friends with, who was a good dude, who had like a pretty good set, Damian Holmes. He was hosting. He's in Brooklyn now. Yeah. And so he was hosting, and then I forget the female comic's name on it, but she was like super aggressive, and she like yelled at me for like just like not laughing during a point where there was like no laughter. You son of a bitch. And I was like, oh wow, this is what comedy is.
This is your fault.
Yeah. And then it was Fahim Anwar, Jamar Neighbors, and what's his name? Mike, Michael, what is his name? His Life from the Comedy Store, and then he has 8. Gerard Carmichael.
Oh,
yeah. And I just saw the different styles of comedy, and it was so different. Like everybody was very different from one another. Right. And he did some bits that were so slow. Like he does this George Bush bit where like he like kind of is like, but I missed him. Like, and it just like let the silence like sit and all of this. And I had watched like Mitch Hedberg. I had watched some of my favorite comedians like back, like Mike Birbiglia was my favorite comic at the time. And I was like, oh, your style fits into whatever. Right. And so legit the next week, like after seeing that show, I was like, oh, I could do this. Like, not that I think I could be on that level at the time, like or anything. Sure. I was just like, oh, this is attainable. Like people out here just do this.
people.
Yeah. And so
they do it.
I had written 5 minutes like a long time before, but I would never do it because it's just been written in a notebook forever. And I've been like paring it down. And I did my first set ever to a packed out room over at Harpin. Like it used to be like really on Tuesday nights. It used to be, it still kind of can be, but it was packed. And because it was my first time, Ted put me up at like towards the middle of the show.
Sure.
And I did a 5 minute like bit, like story bit, and it crushed.
Yes.
And I was like, oh fuck. Like this is everything I've needed this whole time. Like every bit of validation, like for my writing and for being funny and doing all that stuff. And I was like, sweet. And there was a comic, Dan Lewis Fawcett, who no longer does comedy, but he had a show down at this place called Knuckleheads in San Clemente. It is the fucking worst. like talk about a room that did not want comedy. They did not only not want comedy, they didn't want you alive because they knew that you enjoyed comedy. Smiling was like a problem. And this guy is like, look at me. I'm like, I'm like 6 foot, like 170. He is like 6 foot, all of like 140 maybe. Just this really dweeby dude who's trying to, super wispy and like just lanky all over the place. And it's a biker bar in San Clemente. And we get down there and I'm so confident since the other set went well.
Your one other set.
Yeah, my one other set. Yeah, exactly. And I was like, oh, I'm going to fucking be famous. I'm going to crush this. People are going to ask about me after I'm done with the show. Yeah. To this day, I've never been in so much pain so quickly. Like, it was the worst bombing. And like now, I'm like, oh, like I would have bombed with any material there because they just didn't like comedy. But on top of that, it was like such a high to such a... It was the humbling experience that every new comic needs. Like, it was like... I probably wouldn't be as good a writer as I am now if I hadn't bombed so hard that time. If I had done well again, I'd be a piece of shit.
I think that's the ideal sequence of events. It's like you do well enough the first time to where you're like, oh, this is my thing. And then you immediately get crushed into a pulp and put yourself back together again.
And you have to analyze like why that happened. You're like, I did the same set. I don't like what did I do wrong? And it's like, oh, A, you don't know how to read a fucking room, you idiot.
Right.
B, they don't want to hear you.
Yeah, like, sometimes it is an unwinnable situation. You know, like, so I was going to add, so you were part of that. Were you part of that, like, Max Bloom crew? Like,
yeah, a little bit. So I came in on the tail end, so that whole crew had been there for a minute. Probably a few... I want to say they were all there for like 2 years before I got in. And then I started doing comedy in OC when Tom Koss came back. So he came back into the fold. He had like done it and then just like famously like walked out of the room and just left and was just like, I'm done with comedy. I'm leaving forever. And just like disappeared.
That, like, meltdown, right?
And just disappeared. And so that was like probably like a year prior. And he was over. So I used to hang with him. I started with him, Brandon Jetty, a few other dudes who were all in the scene at the same time. Jake Luce, like some other guys who were like washed away a little bit and passed away, unfortunately. And like, and so like that was the crew I started with.
Right.
Now it's bare bones, man. Like I don't know if there's any comics that started at the same time as me. Like, because there's always waves, especially in like the OC scene and all that, and LA scene. There's waves of people. I honestly think Tom's the only person from that wave who's still going.
Yeah.
Like, there are people who are in just before me, like Opie, like Ramsey Badawi, all those people.
Yeah, Opie's doing great.
Yeah, they're crushing it.
Yeah.
But that was the wave, like, before me. So, like, that was where I'm at. Like, somewhere in between waves, But yeah, it's just, Tom and I, that's it.
Yeah.
The only one's left, last man standing.
Tom's a great dude.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
He's been on the podcast before.
Yeah.
But you're Andrew Pupa.
Yeah, I'm Andrew Pupa.
And this is a podcast called Sad Dad.
Yep.
Where we talk about our dads.
Yep.
You mentioned him a couple times now. You have a dad.
I do have a dad.
And I don't think I gave you the same rundown because we just sat down and we started recording.
Yeah, it's fine.
I'm a piece of shit.
No, that's how you do it. That's warming it up and then we're in it. We're in it.
I usually like to start from the beginning as far as like the dad thing goes.
Yeah.
Because it's such a big ask. Like, where do you even like do it? Like,
no, for sure.
And so I always like to start with where did your dad grow up? Was he a Boston kid too?
Yeah, so he grew up in Tewksbury, the town that I'm from. I grew up there, pretty big family. He's one of 5 as well.
Yeah.
And so he grew up there. My grandfather worked in the town of Newton. The funniest thing is like that my grandma, like nobody knew what he did. Yeah. So like this is the type of guy, like kind of rough around the edges, always had a cigar out of his mouth, just chewing on it. He used to like rip like chewing gum in half and give you a half a stick of gum. Like he'd be like, yeah, I'll save the other for later. And you're like, this isn't a thing.
I don't know, man. I think it might be my old Armenian grandma used to do that.
Yeah.
She'd be like, here.
And you're like,
what is that?
Like, is one stick too much? Is it too, what is? Am I gonna go crazy if I have a whole stick of gum?
What kind of weird like Depression era bullshit is this you're putting on me?
Yeah. So so I know that like he grew up in that kind of a household where my grandfather was a bit of a drinker, but he had reformed completely by the time I was around. So just a good kind of rough around the edges dude. But like I don't know what he did, so I don't really know like how my dad grew up as far as that goes. Like that's another thing. Like we're close, but I've never really gotten into that portion of like his life with him.
That's okay.
We like I know that when he was younger, he was super intelligent. Like if you talk to him, he was like a great mathematician. He can figure out shit really quickly, and you're like, how is this same guy able to do those things? If you look at him, you're like, no. And then he talks, and you're like, okay, I don't know where this comes from. Yeah. But he's a pretty smart dude. But he was a deadhead. Super into the Grateful Dead, just like smoking weed, doing whatever. Right. He got like roped in, I think, did some like drug dealing and stuff when he was in high school and like just after high school, doing all that shit. And so like that's kind of, when he met my mom, that's the kind of world that like kids were born into. Right. And it changed. Like he got more structured and better, like, older, but as he got a little bit older, but that's the type of guy he was. Right. Like he was this like free spirit dude. So like I honestly don't understand. I have this other podcast that I'm doing that I have my regular podcast that I do with my co-host and everything. It's great. And we'll talk about it much later. But there's this other podcast idea I have, and I've already done a few episodes where I interview people in my life, and it's more so just to understand more about who they are. Like my first one I wanted to do was I sat down with my grandfather and just interviewed him about his life. Because I'm like, oh, he's like, I didn't get to do this with my grandmother. And I want to have like a thing with like, I want to know how you dealt with life. How are you dealing with things now? Like what brought you to who you are? Right. I know who you are now, but I have no fucking idea who you are.
Do you have any sense of what his relationship was like with your grandfather? Like, your dad?
Yeah, no, they were super close. Like, I know that my dad, he doesn't really say much of anything about any of that, but I know when his dad passed away, like the bottom fell out. Like he didn't his dad was the one that kind of like kept everybody in line. Sure. Like they are all just like sputtering around, and he's like, cut the fucking bullshit. Like chill out. Like you're not gonna do this. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that maybe I wouldn't say that probably their relationship is probably much dissimilar than ours is. Sure. Where like they have respect for one another, they care about one another, but that is probably not voiced nearly as much as you'd like it to be. Right. So I feel like that's probably where they were at, based on what the interactions I saw. Sure. There was never like a hug. There was never like, you know what I mean? Like I legit, I tried to write a bit about this, about the fact that like my dad recently just started telling me he loved me on the phone. Ooh. And that never happened. Yeah, right. And I'm like, I didn't need this. Like, right. It's been so long. Like, I feel like now there's only letdowns from now on. Like, I don't know.
You're about like 30 years too late on this.
Well, and I'm like, are you dying? Yeah. Like, do you know something I don't know? You live 3,000 miles away. Like, what's going on? Yeah. But that's the type of situation where like the same thing with them. I never saw them embrace and just be like, it's good to see you. I never saw that.
Well, and you kind of mentioned, your parents' contentious relationship growing up.
Definitely, yeah.
Do you feel like any of that was carried over from like his childhood? You know what I mean? Like, is that?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't doubt it. Like, I didn't really get to meet my grandmother. She died when I was like, I think like 1 or something. There's like one photo of me in her arms, but I never met her. Like, I don't, like my brain, like that person doesn't, like it's just not a thing. And I never really get to know her. I know from like secondhand experiences that she was kind of rough around the edges too, and had some shit going on. And so I don't really know. Like, it's weird. There's so many gaps in relationships. And like, dude, I'm telling you, it's that East Coast thing where like nobody's supposed to express their feelings. Right. So then like 50 years later, they're all like, well, what was that about? And it's like, oh, all those people are dead. You can't ask these questions anymore.
It's gone.
And so I'm trying to be better about that. But I honestly that wasn't acceptable. It's intrusive to have those conversations.
Sure.
Like I had conversations like that. My uncle passed away like tragically recently, and I was trying to have conversations like I knew that he was super into wrestling. But I didn't know he almost became a professional wrestler.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Like he was this big dude, and he was a little bit slower, and but like he was funny all the time, always on, always like being silly as fuck. Like, but he was a big dude. He was like 6'7", like 350 pounds. Like,
holy shit.
I saw him hold a transmission up with one hand and bolt it in. Like this guy was like a fucking madman, and but I had no idea that he almost became a professional wrestler, but gave it up for his family.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know any of this until he died.
Sure, yeah.
I kind of knew that he was into wrestling, but I didn't know he did any of that.
Right, so
that's the type of shit like where you find out later on, and I'm trying to stopgap that now.
Sure.
With like getting to know my dad, but I have no clue what it was like on them growing up.
Yeah, you have no idea
Like,
if that's a learned behavior. Or
I have
not,
no. I have. I don't know if he was just like, you know, that type of guy who like had quick trigger anger, or if that's something my grandfather like passed down. I really don't know.
Right.
You know.
So you were saying he was like a carpenter. I mean,
yeah. So he did floor installation. So like he still does to this day. He puts in carpets and like hardwood flooring, ceramic tile, all that stuff. So like real laborer's labor. I've tried to do it a little bit. My brother does it now, like a family trade. But I tried to do it for like a minute, like with them.
Man.
No, fuck that, dude. I have to get smarter. I was like, read books, read books now.
Yeah, good for you.
Like you know, and
but he did manage to nab himself an Olympian.
Yeah, I know. That's what I mean. And that's the kind of stuff like my dad. And you know when he did that, he came out to California and was working at a Jack in the Box of all places, where my mom and her friends used to go and like hang out. You know, like Jack in the Box wasn't the lowly, greasy, gross place it is now. They were like that and In-N-Out. Everything else was whatever.
Right.
And so they used to hang out at Jack in the Box, and so she met him working there, and they just started hanging out.
Yeah.
And he had like a big fucking like white dude afro, like giant dude, like just fucking Jerry Garcia-esque, like just everything's cool, man. Like I'm smoking weed, like all that shit.
He seems so chill. Like it's like
that's what I mean. Like I don't know where that disconnect happened.
Right.
I don't know if it's like the stresses of life and having kids.
Sure.
Like snapped him, and like there was so much pressure, you know, because for a while he was the sole breadwinner. But more so by his own design, because like my mom wasn't allowed to work because like she had the kids and she was taking care of the kids, so that he
got 4 kids.
Exactly,
the whole thing,
and like that's a whole thing. And so I don't know if that was what put him over the edge and made him, or if that was always like lurking just below the surface.
Sure.
Like was there something that was pent up? You know. I don't know. I don't know where that came from. But yeah, he nabbed an Olympian, and he was like obviously sweet enough and suave enough to get her to move to fucking Boston from the nicest place in the United States to Boston, which not notorious for being nice or fun.
God bless your mom, man.
Yeah, man.
How long were they dating before they got married? Do you know?
I think like a summer. I think it was like, well, not like married, but like I know that they were dating for a short period of time before she just like up and left.
How old were they? Do you know?
I want to say like 18, like 18, 19, and just like split.
That is a baby boomer ass love story right there,
dude,
man.
for sure. They did it all the time. And then they get married like before they even really know each other, and they're filling each other out, and they're already having kids. And you're on kid number 3 when you're like, wait, you fucking hate onions? What the fuck? And you're like, oh, like how did I not know these like intricate details of your life?
Right.
But that's just how people did it.
Right.
And, you know, it's bizarre.
And was their relationship always contentious? As far as like you being around, or were there moments of you know?
I don't know a world where they didn't dislike each other.
Oh, wow.
But I'm the 4th kid, so I don't know. I mean, but I'm not that far. Like, it was like, we call it like, it's like Irish twins.
Right.
Where it's like my sister, so I'm 32, my brother is 33, my sister's 34, and my other sister's 35.
Yes,
it's gonna be 30.
bang,
yeah, it's like, hey, let's get this done. Like, it's a fucking like factory line, and then we're just shut off the factory and it's over. And so, like, we're not that far apart, but I never saw it. And I'm pretty observant. Like I said, I was quiet and would just sit there for hours and just watch everything.
Right.
And so I never lived that life. I never lived where I saw that they loved each other.
Sure.
I think I saw that they cared about each other at certain times where I'm like, oh, there was something there. Like, you don't outwardly, like, my mom was still to this day, like, talk to my dad occasionally. And they'll be fine. Like, he would come over for like my godson's birthdays and stuff, and they'll be very cordial and fine. And that was very much not on the table when they first split. Like, it was brutal, like real bad. And so growing up, I never saw that. Like it's funny, like when I saw I didn't know it was weird at home until I saw some of my friends across town, like their mother and father, like hugging each other and like arm around each other at dinner. And you're like, wow.
That's kind of gay.
Yeah. Like, why are you guys being so cozy? Is that a word, cozy? I just made that up, didn't I? I don't know. Is that snuggling?
Yeah,
what is that?
What is this?
You weirdos.
Yeah.
Why are your parents being so creepy, Tom? And he's like, dude, what are you talking about? And I'm like, they just fucking kissed, bro.
On the mouth.
Like, dude, we have to watch like scrambled channels to watch this kind of like intimacy.
Your parents are just making porn?
Yeah, exactly.
No, they're honking. What are you talking about?
Yeah, and so like that kind of thing, like I never really was exposed to that as a kid,
right.
you know, like, so I don't know. I just,
Yeah.
I don't know where it turned. It
How old were you when they split?
So it's funny enough. So they like were like very physical. Like I said, now knowing that like my dad probably was dealing with stress, dealing with all this stuff, and he would snap my mom, and then my mom was very like, she was very antagonistic, like to the point where not to like blame the person who's being beaten, obviously not the good thing, but she would drink and then antagonize him because she'd be like, "Fuck you, I don't like you." Like I don't.
Sounds like a bad situation.
I already
all
don't.
around.
Yeah, exactly. Like I don't like you anymore, but we got to stay together for the kids. That old school mentality of like stay together for the kids for the longest time. And then, funny enough, on my 10th birthday, my actual birthday, I was supposed to go to Chuck E. Cheese with all my friends from school, and they had a knockdown drag-out fight on my birthday, and that was the final split. Like on my actual birthday, like that was the day. That was the day of days. And I remember,
kid can be a kid.
yeah.
Chuck E. Cheese.
Yeah. And it was an odd situation because my brothers and sisters stayed with my dad, and I went with my mom. I was the only one who left with my mom, and like my dad, it was contentious to the point where like this is how toxic it was. My dad had been cheating with a neighbor, I guess. I didn't know any of this until later on, but he'd been like cheating with a neighbor. And he had her call Chuck E. Cheese and pretend to be my mom and cancel my birthday party to get back at her for like not allowing me to have fun with her on my birthday.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was fucked. Like it was weird. Like it's funny. Like I told like a girl I was dating at one point that like because the cops would come when shit happened, but it was a small town, and so there was no impetus to like be like, oh, we should bring these kids into like foster care. We should do anything. They're like, they're well fed. He's not hitting them. And like, this will probably emotionally scar them, but they're fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so she's like, I can't believe nobody took you away from your parents. And I like, as a kid, I was like, why would they? But as an adult now, I'm like, oh, that's fucking wow.
that's
like,
pretty
are you
savage,
like, you know? And so, but I mean, me and my best friend Anthony ended up going to Chuck E. Cheese and having a fucking ball of a time. They just let us like go everywhere and do everything. So
sure. After the split, what does your relationship with your dad become? Like, what's it look like?
So yeah, obviously it's pretty contentious. Like I'm the only one who chose my mom's side. And at that point, like I didn't really know she was an alcoholic. Like I just
you were 10.
Yeah, exactly. Like, but I mean, now looking back, like I remember one time vividly, like that I went to get money for the ice cream truck, and she was passed out, like half naked on like her bed or whatever, like in the middle of the day. And I asked her for money, and she just handed me a 20. And for us, like a $20 bill was fucking like that's like $1 million. Like we were losing our minds. And so me and my best friend just went and bought out the ice cream truck, and we're like, fucking yeah, like this is the best. But I was like, oh, that was her. She was drunk. She was still drunk. Like, but as a kid, I was just like, my mom's being fucking cool.
Dude, my
she's
mom's
so cool.
The best.
Yeah. And so I didn't know any of that. And then that kind of like over time, I stayed with my mom. I realized that she'd been drinking. I realized that my dad actually kind of righted the ship a little bit, and he was already seeing like my stepmom before they broke up. Like I don't know any of the ins and I didn't know any of the ins and out at that time.
Sure.
But then like when your parents are splitting up like that, they're super volatile and they just tell the kids shit that they should never tell them.
Right.
Like, well, your mom's fucking somebody, blah blah blah. And, well, I only did that because your dad's been doing this for 5 years, and I'm like, what the fuck? I'm 12. Like,
okay. Thanks for haunting me. For life. Yeah.
And so there was a lot of that. Like there was a lot of back and forth. I mean, they fought. Put in perspective, like, and I always tell people like when they're like, what was growing up like as a kid? They were so petty towards one another that there was a baseball league that my brother was like, we were both in, and we were talking about this earlier, like off pod, but that if you hit a home run over a certain sign in the outfield, you got a free oil change.
Okay.
And so like it was a weird like small town thing to do.
Yeah.
And my brother fucking hit bombs all the time.
Yeah.
And so he hit a home run once, and they were fighting in like the like stands area as to who was going to get this free oil change.
Whose turn it was to get the oil change.
Yeah, and like that type of petty bullshit.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have a serious conversation with my dad for probably a decade. Like we would talk from time to time, but we didn't talk about like life and like wants and what's going on.
Right.
Really until I was maybe 21, 22. That dialogue started. He was with a woman who she had been a stripper, which, you know, that's how that works.
Go Dad.
Yeah. And she became a school teacher. Fucking, you know, again, just that story, the Hollywood story.
Boring. Yeah.
And so, but like, that's all going on. And this woman hated kids. Ugh. And like, I could read people. I literally like.
I hate kids. I'm going to be a teacher.
Yeah, I hate kids. I'm going to be a teacher. And also, I'm going to marry a guy who has 4 kids.
Yeah, right.
But we're older and all that's going on. And so, like, I'm dealing with the fact that, like, I had to put my mom in rehab. Like, I had to bring her to rehab when I'm, like, 13. Right. And, like shut the door and be like, hey, like, you need to go to rehab. And I'm like, I just realized what rehab is. I didn't even know what that is. Mm-hmm. And so I'm doing all of that. Like, so I'm an adult at, like, 12.
Yeah.
And, like, yeah, and all of... Like, my brothers and sisters just ignore shit. Like, just, you know, it's funny. It's like the inverse of what was going on when we were kids.
Yeah.
Where, like, now I'm being an adult, and they're like, oh, I don't see anything. Like, I'm not doing that. And it's kind of harsh reality to talk about with them now because they realize, like, how much they weren't available, like, emotionally and just dealing with it. So I ended up putting my mom in rehab. I'm dealing with that. My stepdad and I, like, pretty close relationship.
Oh, your mom got remarried, too.
Yeah, she got remarried. Again, so the funny thing is, she's with a dude like months later. My dad's with this new chick like minutes later. They probably fucking set up their lives for when the actual like they were. It was bad. You know what I mean? Like they were probably seeing these people outside of wedlock, whatever.
And they probably just don't know how to be alone. Like,
exactly. You know, yeah. Exactly. There's codependency issues for 1,000%.
Never had to be alone.
Yeah. If we sat down with those 4 people and a therapist, they would be like, oh, here's a laundry list of shit you need to work through.
Right.
But at the time, like, that's all happening. And I'm just trying to process it. I'm trying to, like, just, like, doggy paddle through the shit.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really have I had a good relationship with my mom just because I love my mom to death. And so, like, I just had that, like, mama's boy attitude where, like, I'm the one here for mom.
Yeah, right.
And so with that comes distancing myself from my dad.
Right.
And like, resenting him in a lot of ways.
Right.
And then the tough thing is, like, so that relationship is that, you know, he and I are like that. And then my stepmom, basically, she was over it. She was like, I don't want to be with this guy. But she had taken some other guy for all of his money before my dad. She met my dad. So she's just like, this guy.
I'm going to be honest. I don't like where this is going.
Yeah, exactly. And so my dad is already like, he's, you know, an aggressive dude. But like when he's good, like I saw like actual love and like, compassion from him to my stepmom. Like he actually meant it. Like it wasn't veiled. Like it wasn't just because like whatever.
It
there's
wasn't
this
for the kids because that's not a thing anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Like he actually cared. And I didn't see that from her. And that was like a red flag for me. And then I'm like, oh, she's just here. I don't know why she's here. I don't understand it. But by the time I was ready to go to college, she took out a mortgage on the house with him and got him to sign it over to her name. And the house was actually like, my mom's parents had bought it, but my mom, when she left, she's relinquishing part of the house. So in the sale of the home, she would get a portion, my dad would get a portion, and then a portion legally had to go to the college fund for the kids. And so I'm like, fuck yeah, I'm the only one going to college. This is gonna be good for me eventually. Like all this strife is gonna be worth it one day. Because at the very least, I'm gonna be okay with college.
Right.
She takes out this like $60,000 loan against the house, defaults everything. And then books it. Moves to North Carolina with some dude she like hooked up with.
Goddamn.
My dad spins the fuck out. Like starts doing all these drugs, being crazy. Lose the house, and it's gone. All that's gone. So then like I have this hatred for my dad for like allowing that to happen.
Right.
But also like this profound sadness for a man who is now like karma and life had beaten him down to the point where like there's no way he doesn't wake up every day thinking of like I fucked up.
Right.
So like it's this weird part of me that's like I should hate this person, but also like life has hated this person.
Well, yeah.
So like, what are you doing? You know?
I mean, you're a good person. You're very empathetic person for being able to see that.
But at the time, I didn't as much. Like at the time, I shut it off.
I don't blame you at all.
Yeah, and I was just like, fuck everybody. I am on my own. And,
What do you think, I mean, what was it that changed in your dad? Was it just a series of like humbling experiences that made him kind of like chill out and mellow out again? Or, I mean, what do you think was the catalyst to you guys sort of reconnecting as you got older?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was finally finding empathy and realizing that people do change. I didn't forgive him for the first 20 years of my life for physically abusing my mom. Yeah. But he's still my dad. So that's not going to change. And to the point where like I would not like introduce people to my dad. Like I would date women and like not like introduce them to my dad. And they would like bump into each other at the store and stuff. Yeah. Like, oh, I met your dad today. And I was like, fuck, like that's not, like there's this whole wall that I was putting up and like creating this situation. And for a while I was like that. And I very compartmentalized everything in my life. And so I was like, oh, that's just something I do. Like he's not part of my life. Yeah. And then I just started noticing I'm like, he's getting older, he's getting sick, he's doing all this stuff, like he's by himself, he's back living with his sister. Oh. This is not the life he envisioned. Sure. And now he's in that. So what am I going to do? Am I going to be shitty and make him feel worse about all of it? Or am I going to allow him to like be proud of his son and be happy to have a part of my life? And I opened that door and he didn't kick it shut. He was just like, thank you. Like, I like seeing you. And it was a very like open and honest conversation. Like, everything's not fine. Right. We're not best buds, but I do love you and you're my dad. Right. And it was very much the same, like, hey, you didn't choose me when you could have. Like, you didn't understand how much your mom was doing all this stuff and, like, how much I felt that I was being vilified and all of this, and I lashed out and I did all the wrong things, but you don't understand my side of things. And I didn't. And so now I'm just like, it's a wash. Like, she's recovered. She's doing her thing. He's, like, recovered. He's, like, figuring out life, and it's mostly by himself. Sure. And, I'm like, who am I to keep those grudges? Like, I can't. Yeah. It's too heavy and taxing on yourself.
Oh, 100%. Like, being upset with somebody like that, it's so much work.
Every day.
It's really hard. Like, yeah. So I mean, good for you, man. Like, way to like let that go, because that shit'll age.
Dude, but I carried it for a long time, like to the point where like my brothers and sisters were like, "Why are you doing this?" And I was like, "How are you letting go of this shit?" Right. And I was just like, "Oh, like this probably has this is gonna have long-term effects on me. Yeah. Like I can't it's gonna hurt my personal relationships and stuff." Right. And so I think it probably helped me in the long run for all of my other relationships moving forward. And I'm probably more so accepting of people's faults now than I should be at times. But I'll take that over the other now. Yeah. I'll take that over like being an ignorant prick to people just because I want to be. You know what I mean? Like right. I'm glad I have like found that way to do it, because I used to for a really long time, like through my mid-20s, I would just, if somebody wronged me, they were dead to me. Like I don't text you, I don't call you. Like it's like I never met you. Right. You were never in my life. And that's just not a way to live. Like because you're just, what are you doing? Yeah. You're just creating emotional scars for like to go back to later when you're 40 and you're like sitting there and you're like, Jesus Christ.
So is your dad like retired now? Or
no. That's like I said. He's we'll say he's not the most fiscally responsible person. Sure. And so he does fine for himself. He moved into, after he and my stepmom, or ex-stepmom now, after they split up and everything, and he lost the house, he didn't really have anywhere to go, so he moved back into the house where my grandfather, where he grew up. And my aunt had lived there, and they inherited the house from my grandfather when he passed away. Right. And so now they just live there. It's just like two people living there, just roommates basically, with like her kids and a whole thing, Right. But again, that's like he's doing that, and I mean he's, we're closer now than we've ever been, because I just realized he might have been not the best guy at portions of his life, but I truly, in my heart of hearts, don't believe he's a bad guy. Yeah. I believe that, he lost his way, that he, let some shit really, get at him, that he became the worst parts of himself. Like, all of us at some point could become the worst parts of ourselves, but I don't think he's an intrinsically bad person. Sure. And accepting that, I think, allowed me to deal with a lot, but, I think now, looking at him, I'm like, good for him. You know, like I stopped trying to like mold him into somebody else, you know, and be like, you need to do this to get yourself together. You need to do this, Dad, and figure this out. I'm like, no, he's going to be a guy with a ponytail that goes golfing with his buddies and listens to the Grateful Dead every day and occasionally gets online to blast out Trump supporters and tell them to go fuck themselves. But that's my dad. That's who my dad is now.
And just real quick, how's your mom these days?
She's good. I mean, she like, I think the big issue is that like my stepdad is not who I thought he was when I was a kid. Like he's not the most upstanding guy. He's okay. He's not bad, but he's not the type of guy who's ever going to like do more than he needs to help out my mom. And so he and I now have like a very tumultuous relationship, and not like in a bad way, just like we talk, we're fine, but I'm never going to go out of my way to do anything like, because I'm like, you're not being good to my mom.
Sure.
And like, if anything, like my entire life, like anything, like if you're not good to my mom, like I put up that wall, but we talk. I'm very like, I only go home every once in a while for comedy or to meet people. So I won't ever be caustic towards people because like, dude, it's a flash in the pan. I'm going to be there and I'm back, whatever. Sure. What are you doing? All this is going to do is fuck up her life. And so she's doing okay. I mean, she has her own cleaning business where she like cleans residential houses and like new buildings and everything, and does that. And she's always done that. She's really good at that. Yeah. And she's, you know, she has grandkids. She's got like 3 like grandkids from like my sister has 2 kids and my other sister has 2 kids now. And so there's 4 grandkids, plus she has like step grandkids and all of that. So she's pretty busy all the time. Yeah. And as long as she's like spending time with the kids, she's happy. So that's the most you can hope for. Like her life is not what I would like anybody would probably ask for. But it's functional at the moment. And it's one of those things where it's always in flux. But she's a good person and she's doing all she does. She's one of those people who's like a bleeding heart person. She'll do anything for you, even if she has nothing like that she's gaining from it. She's just doing it because you need something. She's probably like so much of an empath that like she'll kill herself trying to help you. And that's the only thing that I wish my mom like would turn off. Like I did that too much like to turn it off. But I wish she had that gear where she could just shut that off every once in a while and like be like, just so that she could like be happier. But I think she's doing as good as she's going to. You know, I think this is like, you know, this is it. You know what I mean? Like she's found her groove and this is what it's going to be from now on, you know?
Right. So, well, let's bring this thing in for a landing. This is part of the show where I ask for a dadicdote. I forgot to tell you this part.
Dadicdote. Okay.
It's just like your favorite story you like to tell about your dad.
Okay.
And it could be good, bad, funny, whatever you want it to be, sad. It's just whatever story or family story you might have that you feel like best encapsulates your dad. If you need a second to think about it through the miracle of editing.
I might call an audible and tell 2 because one is like more so about me and it's very short. But like I was really accident prone as a kid and I was terrified of my dad because my dad was like furious half the time. And so he's very sweet to us, by the way, like never just put this out there. He never touched any of us. Like there was no like you know, he was not ever malicious towards us. He would yell and scream and stuff, but that was it. He would never hit his kids. And so that was like a thing. Not that that's like a bastion of hope, but that was the deal. But it does instill fear in you when you see that shit. So I went sledding and I went down this hill called Suicide Hill, and it was this little tiny strip of this little hill, and at the last minute my sled started spinning and I like held on and I snapped my leg in half. Ooh. And like in that moment I wasn't afraid like about my leg. I just like told my brother, don't tell dad. So like that was like the perspective of like that's what my dad did leg, to like I wasn't worried about the fact that like I might not have a leg. I was just like, please don't tell dad. Please don't tell and dad. He ran and told my dad immediately.
Oh yeah, which is the right thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. So there's that, and then there's also like my dad and I used to, the fun parts is like when I was younger and he did have shared custody and I had to go with him at times. Like I'm really good at, if I'm driving down the road, just spotting animals and stuff because he's super into like animals and conservatories, like all that, like conservation efforts and all of that. So we used to have a timeshare when he was with my stepmom up in Maine and like Lenox, Mass, like that whole area. And so we'd go on long drives. When everybody else would be passed out doing whatever, he'd be like, want to go for a drive. And we'd just go on drives and see animals that I would never otherwise see. And so like I saw like moose, I've seen like lynx, I've seen like bobcats, all this crazy shit. And like now my brain is trained to look for that stuff. So it's funny because people are always like, oh, what are you going to take with you? Like when your parents go away and like, no, like, you know, when your parents die and like, that's just like, if life works that way, if like I outlive them or whatever, like I'll always have that. Like every time I look at an animal and I barely see them, I'm like, oh, that's because my dad. So like, that's nice. That's the one thing I'll always take that like people are like, how are you so good at that? I'm like, my dad. So like, it's a nice, like, regardless of all the bullshit that was happening, like, I love animals and all of that and like that, and I'm vegetarian, like all of that. It probably, like the funny part is, it probably comes from my dad, who at some points was the angriest, scariest man in the world.
Hilarious,
but I want to save animals and save the world because of my dad. So like, nice, it's kind of a nice, you know, anecdote there.
Andrew, you've been amazing today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
People want more Andrew Pupa in their life. Where should they go? Where should they find you?
Yeah, so I'm The Running Joke on Instagram. I'm Andrew Pupa on Facebook and Twitter. And then if you want to check out my podcast, I have Viral Load Podcast. It's on all formats, and we just go into epidemiology and crazy diseases that have happened recently and what's going on. I work with a professor from San Fran on that one. It's kind of a cool, like different podcast if you want to check it out. But yeah, that's where you find me. And then my website, andrewpupa.com, is where I update all my my comedy stuff, and I do ultra trail running stuff. And so I write stories about the races I've done and blogs about all that stuff, which some people think are pretty interesting. So just check that out. Yeah.
Oh, dude. But I'll link all that in the show notes.
Thanks a lot. So much. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
And we're back. Andrew Pupa, everybody. Follow him on social media. Check out his podcast. He just released an episode of that not long ago. Ironically, I think it's about coronavirus. So if you just need some more hot coronavirus action in your life, folks, tune in to Andrew's podcast. Cool, guys. If you want to rate and review on iTunes, I'd love it forever. You can come out to a show if you're in the greater Fresno Clovis area. Come on out. Wednesdays at Full Circle Olympic in Tower District. Monday, Tuesday to Chico's Old Town Clovis, and then Friday, Saturday we're also out at DeChico's doing the damn thing. I'm gonna be up in Humboldt next week. Up in Humboldt for anybody up there, doing the brass rail with a bunch of my funny friends. A lot of previous Sad Dad guests actually. Scott Powers hasn't been on the show. Becky Lynn, I'm going up there with Becky Lynn. She's the best. So cool, guys. I will catch you next week. I got a great episode with Nicole Yates. We talk a lot about food because we both like food. And that's it. Take it easy. Be safe out there, and adios.